Welcome to our training video on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Quick Support for Organizations grants for fiscal year 2025, which runs from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025.
I'm Carolyn Koska, the Grants Administrator for Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. During this training, you'll learn about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, the guidelines for this grant program, the resources that are available for you on our website, how to use our online grant system, the application questions you'll need to answer, and the grant process, or what happens after you submit your application. Check out the chapters below if you want to go directly to a particular topic. For now, we'll start out talking briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council.
Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota, working to get state arts funding out into all corners. So most of our funding does come from the state of Minnesota, with an allocation from the State General Fund, but the majority from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we use for our artist grants, and from memberships and donations from around our region. To be a little more specific about our region, applicant organizations need to be located within that region, which includes 18 counties: Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine, and also 2 tribal nations: Pajutazizi, Upper Sioux Community, and Chanshayapi, Lower Sioux Community. We acknowledge that the SMOC region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. Quick Support for Organizations grants are open in general to 501c3 nonprofit organizations and units of government, which would be city, county, or tribal government. But as we go through our different project types, you'll see that there are a few exceptions to that. If your organization is operating in the spirit of a nonprofit but doesn't have its 501c3 status yet, you can apply using a fiscal sponsor, and this would be an organization that does meet our eligibility requirements and who will agree to receive your funds for you and be ultimately responsible for the project. Your application will need a signed agreement between your organization and the fiscal sponsor organization, spelling out how that relationship will work, along with a signature from someone representing the fiscal sponsor organization. There are 5 project types that you can do under this grant program, which include a small arts project, a small equipment purchase, planning for a public art project, arts organization development, and arts organization startup. In more detail, for a small arts project, this is open to nonprofit organizations, units of government, and also if you are a public school or community ed that has a community-focused project. The activities for this project type can be, in general, any kind of arts programming that your organization is doing, so it could be an art exhibit or performance, art classes for community members, a smaller public art project or event. For the small equipment purchase, this is again open to nonprofits and government units. And some examples of what your purchases could include are sound and lighting equipment, art studio equipment, office equipment like computers or software, things related to storage, structural improvements like improvements for accessibility, new signage, etc. The public art planning project type is again open to nonprofits and government units, and this would be to plan for a specific physical public art project that's happening in your community in preparation for applying for the larger grant for the actual project. Planning activities for this could include getting input from your community as far as what they want to see in this project, the process of requesting qualifications and proposals from artists in order to choose who that artist is going to be and come up with the design for the final project. Anything else that you may need to do to figure out what costs are involved, what resources might you already have, or you may need to do some research on some feasibility or sustainability of the project. The Arts Organization Development project type is open to arts organizations only, which would be an organization whose mission is focused primarily on the arts. And this would allow for funding that will help increase your long-term stability and capacity. And the organization development activities could be things like training for staff or board members if you want to send them to some sort of workshop or conference. Maybe you need to hire a consultant to help you with some strategic planning, board development, fundraising plans, marketing, etc. You could do a community survey to determine what needs are out there if you need to make some changes. Or this could also help you develop some new programming. And finally, our arts organization startup project type, again open to arts organizations only, and this is focused on developing articles of incorporation and bylaws and filing for your 501c3 nonprofit status. The Quick Support for Organizations grant is available for up to $2,500, and no matching funds are required, which means that as long as your project costs are within the amount you can request, your organization does not need to come up with any other funding towards the project. We do have a funding limit for organizations. You are limited to $20,000 per year in SMOC grant funds. This does exclude any operating support funding you may already be receiving from us. Some other things to be aware of as far as eligibility, and all of these are not eligible for these grants: projects that don't have an art focus, requests for funding for staff salaries or contracted staff, requests for new building construction, purchase of real estate or endowment funds, educational projects within a school system. Also ineligible are activities that take place outside of Minnesota. We are using state funds for these grants, and that is a requirement of those funds. Also ineligible is the religious socialization of the participants or audience, fundraising events. In other words, the grant funding should allow your project to break even, not to make a profit. Also ineligible, payments of debts that are incurred before the grant begins. Using these grant funds to match another SMOC grant project. If you are already receiving operating support from us, you cannot include prorated operating type costs within this budget. And you would also be ineligible if you have a past due final report still outstanding with us. This grant is available with a monthly deadline, which is the first of the month, August 2024 through May 2025. And the earliest date that you could start your project would be the first day of the following month. So if you applied by September 1st, you would hear whether you got the grant and be able to start your project by October 1st. Also be aware that your application needs to be submitted by 4 p.m. on the date of the deadline, and note that this is a change from previous years when the time was 4:30 p.m. You'll need to choose a start date for your project, and in doing that, you'll first want to check for the earliest allowed start date for the round you're applying for. You can't start any project activities before that start date, and this would include things like ordering any supplies, holding auditions, doing any advertising, and you can't expend any funds before that start date. If there is something that you would need to pay for before that date, for instance, if you had to put down a deposit on something early, then you could not include that cost in your project budget. You'll also need to choose a project end date. You'll want to give yourself plenty of time to complete the project activities and then also evaluate the project. For instance, if you are purchasing some equipment, you'll want to allow not just for the purchase, but also for some time to use the equipment and get some feedback on that. Also be aware that projects awarded in fiscal year 25 need to be finished up by June 30th of 2026. So that is the latest end date that you could choose. Your project will also need 2 people connected with it. You'll need a project director, and this will be the person who is most directly responsible for the day-to-day activities of the project. And then you'll need an authorizing official, and that is someone who has authorizing power for your organization, like your president or treasurer. These do need to be 2 separate people, and both will need to sign all of your grant documents, including the application. Now we'll head over to our website and take a look at what resources are available for you there. Here we are on our website, and everything that you need will be under this Grants tab, including a login when you're ready for the grant system. But we also have information about each of our grant programs. So we'll go to our Grants for Organizations, and then find our Quick Support for Organizations grant. On this page, the first thing you'll see is the guidelines for the program. And it's important to read through these. They include information about the different project types, as well as everything you need to know about dates and deadlines and eligibility. So please make sure to read through that. The Apply Now button will take you to the grant system. And then we have all of the important dates that you'll need to know related to the project, when the deadlines are, when you can expect that the review process is taking place, and your earliest project start dates. We also have a video tutorial about the program. Right now we have last year's, but it will be replaced with this new tutorial that we're recording right now. You also can take a look at what live workshops are available throughout the coming year. And then down at the bottom, there's a list of links to some materials that will be helpful. We've got the guidelines. Again, you can open up the applications in a Word document. Some people prefer to write their draft in that first and then paste into the grant system later. You can look closer at the scoring criteria, and you can even check out the final report questions if you'd like to know what you're getting into with those. And now we will head over to our Workshops and Assistance page. Our Workshops and Assistance page outlines all of the ways that you can get help with your application. We have grant support open office hours on the second Tuesday of each month. You can stop by our office in Marshall from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. While you're there, you can talk through project ideas, sit and work on your application with staff there to answer any questions. Maybe you need some help preparing your work samples or working on a final report, but you can just stop in and get the help that you need. We also have some grants Q&A sessions. There are a series of those in person, so look to see if we are coming somewhere near you, and these will be updated as we have specific dates scheduled. We also have virtual sessions available. You can register for those here. And for both of these, you can learn a little bit about all of the grant programs that are available and then have time to ask questions about your specific project and get those answered. This year we also have a couple of workshops on some specific grant writing topics. First on reaching underserved and underrepresented communities, and then on grant goals and evaluation, so you can check those out. You can easily schedule some time to meet with me. You can just click this link and choose a time on my calendar, and we can meet by phone, by Zoom, or in person at our office in Marshall. And then here are videos of our past workshops that we've had as we are recording our videos for our fiscal year 25 grants. Those will also appear here. There's one more page with resources for you, and that is our credits and resources page. So we've got links to grant credit lines and logos that you may need to be using for your marketing. Then we've got a sample contract, so you can see what that looks like ahead of time. If your organization is using a fiscal sponsor, there's a sample agreement available here. If you're doing a project where you need a cooperative agreement with your facility owner, there's a sample agreement here for that. And then we've also got some accessibility resources here for you. And now we'll head over to our grant system. That brings us to our login page. You can enter your email address and password here if you already have an account in the system. If you are totally new, you can click Create New Account. If you're not sure whether you or someone from your organization already has an account in the system, you can contact us and we can get that figured out for you. But for right now, we are going to log in. And as we first come into the system, a reminder, if you have also worked as a grant reviewer or panelist, for us to remember to switch your role to applicant. And here we are on our applicant dashboard. So this is where you will come when you log in to the grant system. Unless you are coming in for the first time, then you will be brought straight to this apply page. The apply page lists all of the applications that are currently available. So we'll scroll through to find our quick support for organizations. Here that is. If you would like to just take a look at the application without actually starting anything, you can click this preview button, but we're going to go ahead and hit apply. I'll point out a couple buttons as we get started here. If you need to work in a different language, we have Google Translate embedded into the site. You can select your language here and it will translate the interface and your application questions for you, and you can go ahead and work in that language. We have the Copy Previous Answers button. If you have done an application in the system before, it will bring up a list of your previous applications and you can choose one to copy from, and it will copy over the answers to any questions that are the same in both applications. However, because this quick support program has several different project types, the copy feature is not as effective for this program. We also have the Collaborate button, and this will allow someone else to work on the application with you. You can enter their email address here and choose what level of permission you'd like to give them. Then you can put in a message, whatever it is you'd like them to do, whether you want them to proof the application, add in some budget numbers, maybe come in and sign the application, and then you can just click invite. They will receive an email and we'll just need to create a password in order to come in and work on the application with you. You'll start out filling in a name for your project. There are some examples here along with the amount you are requesting, though you'll probably want to wait to fill that in until you have done your budget. And then here's where you will enter your project start and end dates. And then you'll choose the type of project that you are applying for. And note that your answer will bring up different questions based on which project type you choose. And we will go through all of these project types so you can see what to expect, but we'll start with our art project. We have a couple of those important documents linked here again for you, along with some tips as you're working on your application. You'll see that most of the fields have quite a large character limit, and we're not expecting you to completely fill that up. If you feel like you have fully answered the question, there's no need to try and continue to fill up that text box. So for your small art project, you're asked to describe the artists or production that you have chosen and why. Are there any other personnel who are going to play a large role? What will they be responsible for? Are you collaborating with other community groups, and what kind of support are they providing? What is your timeline, and how do you plan to promote this project? You can list your public events here that are related to the project so that we can put those on our area arts calendar. Then you're asked to provide resumes or bios of the artists who are going to be involved in the project, along with some work samples, and we've got some information here about how to resize images or combine multiple files into one PDF. Something new this year are some guidelines around social media samples. Because not everyone who may be reviewing your application has access to social media, we ask that you don't provide social media links as your only work samples. If you do need to provide them, make sure your profile is public, but also be aware that not everyone may be able to see that, and it may be helpful to include some screenshots from that social media link so people can see what that was supposed to be. So there are several places for you to upload some samples, or you can provide them in the link fields. In both cases, you'll want to describe what it is you are attaching. Then you'll need to describe which groups in your community might be underserved or underrepresented. This could be based on race or ethnicity, language, socioeconomic level, gender, ability, etc. And if you want to learn more about your community in order to determine this, the Minnesota Compass site is helpful. You can look up your community here, and it will bring up some data for you. You can look at things like age, race or ethnicity. If one of these answers says suppressed, nothing to be concerned about there. It just means it's either a very small number or it is a number that has a larger margin of error around it. But you still should be able to get a pretty good idea of the makeup of your community. You can also look at things like people with disabilities, income, transportation, etc. So this can be helpful to give you an idea of who might be underserved or underrepresented. Then you're asked to choose at least one of those groups and identify some specific things that you are planning to do to reach out to or involve them in your project. So it might be things like including members of that group in your planning. Maybe there are special ticket prices. You might translate some materials, provide transportation, etc. There are lots of options of things that you could do. And we also realize that your organization might already consist of or primarily serve members of the group you're focusing on, so there is space to explain that if you'd like. And then finally, for this question, we also want you to talk about how you will make sure the project will be accessible to those with various disabilities. Next, we're asking about the impact of the project. What are your goals? What impact might this have on your community or your organization? And you can look at changes that might happen as far as artistic skills, knowledge, attitude, or behavior of participants, audiences, and artists. And then how might you plan to measure or prove that those changes have taken place? You'll need some way to gather some feedback, and then what you might look for in those results that will show that you have been successful. If you are using an evaluation tool of some kind, you can attach that here. Then we ask for some information about audience numbers. Next is your budget. And you can either use this Excel form that we have here or create your own budget. And we'll take a look at that Excel form. And here's that form, which is helpful as it does some calculations for you. So you'll start out and enter either the name of your organization or name of project up at the top here, and then you can start describing the different costs that you're going to have. And we'll put some amounts in here. And you'll see it's adding up for you. Then if you have any income toward the project, if there are some donations that you have, ticket sales, that can go here. And then as we get to the bottom here, it will do some calculations for us. It tells us our request cannot exceed $1,900, which they took our total cost minus our total funding, or the maximum request amount for this grant program, whichever is less. So our quick support for organizations is $2,500, so $1,900 is less. So that's how much we can request, and our profit equals 0, which is what we're aiming for. But let's say our project is more expensive. And now it tells us our request cannot exceed $2,900 or the maximum, whichever is less. So now our $2,500 is less than $2,900, so we can request $2,500, but now we see our profit says minus $400, which means we will have to come up with that if there's maybe another donation that we can find. And now our profit equals 0. So you would fill this out, save it, and attach it to your application here. We also ask if you have applied for funding from the Minnesota State Arts Board for this project, and if so, to explain that and include that in the income section of your budget. We have a budget narrative field for you to explain any more details that might not fit into that budget spreadsheet. And then you're asked some information about your organization. Briefly, your mission statement, history, what kinds of programs do you offer, who do you generally serve, some information about your board, along with a list of your board members and their qualifications. And then this next section is just some data that we need to collect and doesn't have any bearing on your application. You are asked to enter your most recently completed fiscal year, and then depending on your organization type, if you're an arts organization, you'll enter your total expenses for that year. If you are a non-arts organization, you'll enter what you might have spent on the arts for that year. And then some demographic questions. Total audience that you served during that year above. We also ask what opportunities for assistance you might have taken advantage of in preparing your application. And then some contact information, your project director, your authorizing official, who the grant writer was in case we have some questions. And then if your organization is using a fiscal sponsor, some fields will appear to enter contact information for them, along with a spot to attach the agreement that you have with that organization. If you answer no, you won't see that at all. And then you've got your signatures, and this is a good place to use that collaborate button up at the top to ask, for instance, someone from your fiscal sponsor organization to come in and sign. One last thing, this year we are participating along with our other fellow regional arts councils in gathering some feedback about our application process. So we've got just a few questions here about your experience with our application, and these don't have any bearing on your score at all. The reviewers will not see this section at all, but we'd appreciate if you could give us some feedback there. And now we will head back up to the top of the application and look at what some of those other project types look like. So if you are doing a public art planning project, you're asked, describe the proposed public art project toward which you are planning. What kind of planning are you wanting to do with this grant funding? Who's going to be involved and is acting as artistic director for this, and what is their experience? Will you be working with an organization that is going to help facilitate your planning process? How are you going to receive and use public input, and what is your timeline? And you can attach a resume for your artistic director here. Again, you're asked about reaching the underserved and underrepresented. And then for your impact, again, what are your goals? What impact will this have on your final project? For instance, will it enable that final project to meet the artistic needs of the community? Will it affect the artistic quality and merit of the final project? And then again, how might you plan to measure or prove that those changes have taken place? And then we continue on with similar questions to before. For a small equipment purchase, you're asked to describe what are you purchasing or what improvements are you planning to do. If you are working with a consultant or contractor, why have you chosen them and what are their qualifications? Who from your organization is going to be involved and what is your timeline? There are a couple of fields where you can attach some supplemental materials if you are providing some photos of the space, if those are relevant, maybe some technical specs about some of the equipment that you're wanting to purchase. You can attach those here. And then for impact, again, what are your goals? Will this strengthen your organization's ability to provide arts activities? What specific programs might benefit? And again, how do you plan to measure or prove whether that has happened? For arts organization development, you are asked what are the development activities you're planning to do. If you're working with a consultant, why have you chosen them and what are their qualifications? Who's involved from your organization? Is your board fully involved and committed to this? And what is the timeline? Then there's a space to include the proposal from the consultant that you're working with. And then for your goals, what kinds of changes might take place regarding your organization's capacity or long-term stability? Or are there changes you're hoping for to the skills, knowledge, attitude, or behavior of board members, staff, volunteers, donors, or constituents? And how will you measure that? And then finally, for our arts organization startup project type, this one starts out a little differently with some information about your organization, similar to what we saw before. Then you're asked to provide some work samples of the programming that you've been doing. And again, describing how your organization in general reaches the underserved or underrepresented in your community, board members. And in this case, we are also asking you to provide names and describe roles of at least 2 key people from your organization. And there's a spot to upload their resumes here. Then we ask what's actually involved in the startup project that you need to do. Do you still need to develop articles of incorporation and bylaws at this point? Who's going to be handling legal and accounting activities? If you're working with a consultant, why have you chosen them and what are their qualifications? And what is the timeline? And then what are your specific goals for this actual startup project? Again, how might this affect your organization's capacity or stability to have your 501c3 status? So we'll head back down to the bottom of the application. All of this should look familiar. And at the bottom here, we've got a couple buttons, the submit for when you're all finished and ready, and then the save application button. The system will be auto-saving for you as you're working, but if you click the save application button, you'll see a list of all of the required questions remaining that you still need to answer. So this will help you keep track of your progress. And if you'd like to keep working, you can hit the continue button, but we're going to go back to our dashboard. So here now is this application that we just started. And if you want to go back in and keep working, you can click this edit application link. And this is the same place you would come back to if you are awarded a grant, and you'll find your grant contract and final report. And now we'll head back to our slides. Now we have some tips for you as you're working on your application. First, make sure to think ahead to choose the best timing for your application. So check out the deadlines and start dates and see what makes the most sense for the timing of your project. Then read the guidelines and criteria carefully. As we mentioned before, we went through most things, but there are probably a few things that are in that written guidelines that we may not have covered. So make sure to take a look at that so that you're not surprised by anything. It's also good to start working on your application early. If you are needing to gather information from other people, if you might have some questions you need time to get answered, just make sure to give yourself plenty of time. Also in the application, you have noticed that a lot of the questions had multiple parts to them. So make sure you are addressing all of those and really answering those fully, that you're not missing any of those pieces. Also, as you're writing, you'll want to keep your answers real clear and concise. As we mentioned before, no need to try and fill up the text boxes if you feel like you fully answered the question. And also no need for any fancy grant language you might think you need. Just using everyday language is fine, as if you're telling a friend about the project. Another suggestion is to not assume that grant reviewers know anything about you or your project. We have reviewers coming from all around the region, so they may not have heard of your organization or be familiar with you as an artist. So be careful about including acronyms without spelling those out, talking about certain programs without explaining. Just assume as you're writing that the person reading doesn't know anything about what you're doing. And finally, we are here to help, so don't hesitate to contact us with any questions. There are multiple ways to get assistance with your application. You can certainly contact us to talk through your project before you're getting started. Make sure you're under the right grant program. Make sure elements of your project are eligible. You can also get answers to questions about the application as you're working on your project. And finally, we can do a review of your application draft before you submit it. If you let us know up to about 2 weeks before the deadline, we can guarantee that we're able to look through your application, give you some feedback, let you know if you're missing anything, if anything might sound confusing to the reviewers. This does not guarantee funding of your project, but we are able to give you some feedback. So another great reason to start working on your application early in order to have time for that part of the process. So what happens after you submit your application? The first thing is that SMOC staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. And if at that stage we find that something is missing or there's an eligibility concern, you'll have 48 hours to fix whatever that is. And then at that point, the group of applications from the round will go on to a panel of individuals from around our region who will discuss and score the applications based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a minute. And then finally, their recommendations go to our board of directors who make the final funding decisions. And that most often just involves taking the applications in ranked order of score and taking the funding down the list as far as the budget goes. Our grant review panelists will be looking at the following criteria in scoring your application. They will look at your ability to accomplish the project, worth 1/3 of your score, and then the impact of the project, worth 2/3 of your score. To be more specific, for ability to accomplish the project, they'll be looking to see if you have an appropriate timeline and budget, and if applicable, appropriate marketing plans. They'll also look to see that any personnel involved are capable and committed. This could be artists, consultants, board members, etc., depending on your project type. Then for impact, they will look to see if you have identified proposed changes to take place as a result of the project and have plans to measure whether those changes have taken place. They'll also look to see that the intent of your project type is fulfilled, and we'll look at that in a minute. And also whether the underserved or underrepresented in your community are enabled to participate in your activities. So for the art project type, they will be looking to see if the project provides potential for your participants to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts. For an equipment purchase, they'll look to see if that will strengthen your organization's ability to provide arts activities and benefit some specific programs that you have. For public art planning, they will look to see if your planning activities will enable your final project to be well planned, of high artistic merit, and aligned with community needs. For arts organization development, they'll look to see that these activities will help you to achieve increased capacity and stability. And for the arts organization startup project type, they'll look to see that the artistic merit of your activities and strength of your operations will allow your organization to play a role in the arts development of your community. After the panel has completed its scoring, you may also be able to be awarded some additional points if you meet some of the following criteria related to SMOC funding priorities. So if you are a first-time applicant to SMOC, if your organization is led by or primarily serving BIPOC or LGBTQ communities or people with disabilities, or if you are from a county that hasn't received as much funding from us recently. So you could be awarded up to 3 additional percentage points for each of these criteria, for a maximum of 9 additional percentage points added to your score. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete a contract, and we saw where those would be located in the grant system a little bit ago. And then payment of your full grant award will be sent to you after the contract is received, and you'll have an option to receive that electronically or by check. You'll need to acknowledge your grant on any publicity or marketing materials that you have. You'll need to include the credit line that can be found in your grant contract. And you might also need to include this Minnesota Legacy logo depending on the source of your funds. But all of these credit materials and logo files, etc., will be sent to you, so you won't have to worry about which options you need to include. And we also looked at the credits and materials page on our website where some of that information is available also. We understand that things happen as you're working on your project. So if it's looking like you may need to make some changes to your original plan while your project is in progress, contact us and we may be able to help with things like extending your project end date, approving some changes to your budget. So no worries if things change, but just make sure to contact us and get those changes approved. You'll be receiving a reminder partway through your project, checking in to see if anything has changed and what kind of changes might require a project change request to SMOC. You'll have a final report due 60 days after the project end date that you have chosen. So once you start your project, it's a good idea to go into that report and check what information you'll need to be gathering. There are some audience demographics questions, for instance. So make sure to look ahead what kind of information you'll need to be gathering during your project. And that's the last of the information that I need to share with you today.
Thanks for joining us for this grant training. Don't forget to take advantage of the options for assistance as you work on your application. Feel free to contact us with any questions you may have. Good luck!